Hi, it's Dana, and I'm here with your divination for the full moon in Sidereal Virgo. The 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide says, clearly seeing the facts.
Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know to do.
The facts of life, the facts of life. The facts of life, the facts of life. That song literally started playing in my head. Some of you all are way too young to even know what that is. I'm almost too young, almost too young to know what that theme song is from. But yeah, I want to start off this 21st episode of the Divination for Liberation podcast with a moment of intentional reflection. And I want you to think about how 2024 ended. No, Lord, I really cannot get my mind to accept that it is 2026. Like, I can't. So we're going to try this again because last year was 2025, not 2024. Okay. Lord, help us all. Time is filled with swift transition. Not the earth unmoved can stand. Okay. So I want you to think about how 2025 ended for you personally. I want you to think about how 2026 began. And just take a little mental trip through the past 3-4 months. And a lot of what I do on the Divination for Liberation podcast and what I do with astrology in general is to articulate time-based maps that help you to interpret the time in your life. Kind of the premise of astrology is that the time means something, and we come to understand what the time means because we've observed the patterns of time. Observing patterns is actually how I define divination, right? So if this is the Divination for Liberation podcast, we are observing the patterns of time. We are observing the patterns of existence for the purpose of liberation. And if you tuned into the last episode, I'm going to try to drop a clip right here so you can see where I talked about what the definition of liberation is. I'm going to drop the clip here. Got it. Revolution begins in the body. Freedom begins in the imagination. And liberation is what happens when we revolt and we get free together. Liberation is at the intersection of embodiment and imagination. But yes, that's divination for liberation. And so I just want you to think about the past 3 to 4 months. And I want you to think about your journey to this present moment. And I want to offer this full moon as a kind of contextual interpretation, as a kind of peak or summit or culmination, I think is the best word for this first period of the year, the first uh, uh, season of the year. We've been moving from stellium to stellium, and that is because the planets have been moving together. They have been in one sign, and then they shift into the next sign, and then they go into the next sign. And the effect of that is that all of the activity, all of the attention, all of the tension is kind of focused on one area of your life at a time. And it can feel like other things are stagnant and they're not moving. It could feel like you're stuck in other areas of your life. But this, one area of your life where the stellium happens to be at any given time seems to be where the attention, focus, and activity is. Um, so, again, as you're reflecting on these past 3 or 4 months, where has the central focus of activity been in your life? I'm going to do, um, I'm not, I was about to go down a rabbit hole that was probably going to take me a whole 30 minutes, but I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Um, we started the year with a stellium in sidereal Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the pattern maker. That is, they have an existing interpretation, belief system, or teaching or understanding that they are applying to their experiences. Then we went to a Capricorn stellium, and Capricorn is the caretaker. And this is about resourcefulness and having enough. Then we shifted to a sidereal Aquarius stellium. And the ideal of Aquarius is to know myself for myself. That means to shut off the external data that we get from other people's treatment of us, from other people's projections onto us, from other people's assignment of identity to us, right? We shut all of that out and we have a kind of using the tool of imagination to know ourselves. Who do I see myself as? How do I conceive of myself? That was Aquarius. That was also eclipse season, right? Now we are in between stelliums. There's still an Aquarius stellium, but there's also a Pisces stellium that we will be in through the end of April. Part of the reason why I'm taking the time to explain this kind of technical astrological stuff to you, even though you may not know what it means, is because I want you to have a sense of what are we dealing with? How long have we been here? And how much longer are we going to be here? Even if you can't understand the language of the signs, or maybe it doesn't resonate with you because of how you've approached or learned astrology, what you can take from this is that April is kind of a marker of astrological time as far as I'm concerned, in that everything, let's just say for the purposes of this conversation, everything from December through the end of April is one chunk of time. So by the end of April, as we get into May and especially June, you're going to not only feel a shift, but you are also going to notice that other areas of your life that maybe you've wanted things to change in, maybe that have been stagnant and stuck in a particular set of circumstances, by the time we get to the end of April, you're going to feel that all start to loosen up. You're going to feel and you're going to experience other areas of your life start to shift. I think one of the most important things that has been a defining feature of this chunk of time is that Mercury has been in Aquarius for a really long time. And so it's like we're stuck having the same conversations, uh, talking about the same things over and over and over again. And it can get laborious and boring, but part of that is because we really have something to work out in our Aquarius house. And collectively, we have something to work out in terms of Aquarius as an experience. Remember, in Divination for Liberation, Sidereal Astrology, signs are experiences. When you have a sign occupied in your birth chart, it's saying these are the experiences that defined the environment you were born into. When you don't have a sign occupied in your birth chart, it says these experiences were not a defining feature of the environment that you were born into. Thus, you have not acquired the tools, the tasks, the habits that are associated with this sign, the predilections that might be associated with that sign that's absent from your birth chart because it's not there, right? It wasn't nothing going on in that area. But collectively, we all get the opportunity to experience each sign in a very cyclical fashion. And every planet is moving through a sign at its own rate in its own pattern. And so Mercury has happened to be in Aquarius for a really long time. And Aquarius is this sign that kind of disassociates its identity from anything external and anything projected. Aquarius is this sign that's about reclaiming one's identity, and it's about self-determination. It's about saying, hey, I don't have to come stand where you are and look at myself and see myself and know myself through your own experiences and your own eyes. And as a matter of fact, under capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, or I kind of want to say under the dominion and the domination and violence of capitalists, because these are actual people, of white supremacists, because these are actual people, and patriarchal people, because these are actual people, right? They're not just these nebulous names or ideas that we're dealing with. Like, we can make an actual list of the people who are the capitalists that are projecting and assigning identities onto us, that are saying that, you know, trans people in Kansas must have the gender that they were assigned at birth on their driver's license, and canceling the driver's license of trans people, or the IOC, the organization that runs the Olympics, saying that trans women will not be able to participate in the 2028 Olympics. And furthermore, every single woman will have to undergo chromosome testing, right? I mean, can we just pause there for a minute? This is Aquarius, right? Like when I'm talking about this astrology, like this is happening now. Like right now, we are dealing with power structures that are saying, you don't get to determine who you are. I'm going to tell you who you are. I am going to deprive you of the opportunity to do and say what it is that you feel like you are capable of doing and saying. As a matter of fact, I feel like this whole trans thing, particularly with driving and with the Olympics, is under the domain of Mars in Sidereal Aquarius. If you go back to February, in the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide, on the 23rd, Mars entered Aquarius, and I wrote there, self-determining what I'm capable of. And what this really looks like is that at any given time, the structures created by capitalist white supremacists and patriarchs, they are determining who can do what in society based on arbitrary factors like the genitals that were in between their legs or not in between their legs when they were born, based on arbitrary factors like skin color, the language you speak, the size of your body, the texture of your hair, all of those things. And some of being a realist, and some of, you know, accepting the facts, right? Which is what we're talking about at this full moon, is saying that, oh, well, this is just the way that it is. These are the jobs that men are allowed to have or that men are capable of. These are the things that women can do. These are the things that children can do. And so what is determining what we are capable of is not our own internal will, not our sense of motivation, not our desire to try, not what we might actually be capable of, but these identities that are assigned to us are determining what we're capable of. This transit is really loud because it's tied up with the eclipses. And so again, we've seen this self-determination of what we're capable of being challenged by the structures of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. I want to get to this full moon, but I just want to say this last thing really quick about this issue, particularly with the Olympics and the banning of trans women from participating, and the requirement that all women be required to undergo chromosome testing. Being transphobic hurts everyone. Being transphobic is like stabbing yourself in the foot, regardless of what gender you identify with. I'm sure there are people who come across my content and come across my podcast and they don't want to hear nothing I have to say about trans people. They want to scroll right past my post that's got 500,000 views on it and beautiful comments on it. Like, shout out to, the folks who be on my page, because y'all are really about that life. But I know nobody want to hear about trans people because you've bought into all of the propaganda and you're so easy to manipulate emotionally that you are willing to accept lies about who is a real threat to you in your life and livelihood and who's not a real threat, right? You've just accepted as fact and truth that somehow a trans person demanding that they be identified the way that they experience themselves is some kind of harm to you, when in fact, now, every single one of you transphobic Olympian women now have to get chromosome testing because you couldn't see the writing on the wall. You couldn't see and accept and understand when we say to you that gender is not real. If you have to police it, it is a social construct. If I have to punish you in order to coerce you, to get you to behave the way that I want you to, it is not natural. It is not biological. It is completely a social construct. And so if you are a female Olympian, and by female, I mean assigned female at birth, right? And you are harboring sentiments of transphobia, if you have not understood that you've gotten this far as a woman in your athletic field because at some point you weren't allowed. There was no game for you to play. And so you think the territory that you have to protect is the territory of your vagina being the determining factor of your womanhood, and using that to enforce boundaries to keep other people out, particularly trans people. If you have not identified your struggle as a woman with the struggle of trans women, you don't really want to win. You definitely don't want to get free, because you've literally stood by silent or participating in the oppression of trans women. And now look, now you got to go prove you're a woman. And some of you all are going to find out things that are going to make you very, very, very uncomfortable. And the thing that you have wrapped your entire identity in as a woman is going to mean nothing. When you get that chromosome testing and you find out that that whole XXXY chromosome thing is a fallacy. It's not real, baby. It never was real. They lied to you. Speaking of lies, let's talk about this full moon in Sidereal Virgo. Clearly seeing the facts. The ideal of Virgo is to be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. Are you catching the segue here? Can you see the connection here? To be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. I would imagine at some point there's going to be some type of lawsuit and this whole chromosome testing, although I kind of would like to see the chromosome testing happen just so, this whole fallacy of gender can be fallen apart once and for all. Like, let's just do it. Let's do it. Let's see who got what. Let's see who's, quote, a real woman, right? That vagina don't mean nothing. Like, first of all, why would your whole identity be wrapped up in genitals that nobody can even see? That's dumb to me. But I know why. It's patriarchy, right? Like, anyways, clearly seeing the facts. The ideal of Virgo is to be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. And often how Virgo establishes that trust is by collecting data, right? So now we have to collect the chromosome data of all of the women who are participating in the 2028 Olympics, right? Like, we have to be able to trust that if you say you're a woman, you're an actual woman. They not gonna do that for the men? No? Oh, okay, my bad. Didn't mean to offend anybody. Right? Virgo is the analyzer. And one of the myths about Virgo that I love to bust is that Virgo is not a perfectionist. The perfectionist is actually Leo and Libra. Those are the two perfectionists, right? Virgo is about measurable precision. It is about meticulousness and the minutia that can get us to the most precise and accurate conclusion. And Virgo does this by measuring, by calculating, by analyzing, by collecting data. As an earth sign, it is about the reality of things, the apparent qualities of things that we can observe and measure. In my client work, if I made a list of signs who were most likely to always feel misunderstood, Virgo would be number one. If I were to make a list of signs most likely to just have a little smidgen of the tism, un petit peu of the ADHD, it would be Virgo. Virgo struggles to see the bigger picture. It struggles to connect the dots. It struggles to recognize the pattern. And sometimes people will feel like it is willful on the behalf of Virgo, that Virgo is just willfully and intentionally, mincing words and, playing semantics with you, right? Now, sometimes if you got Mars in Sidereal Virgo, you're absolutely doing that on purpose. I shouldn't cuss on here because I don't want my I don't want my podcast to get flagged. But anyways, people might feel that Virgo is doing this on purpose, that Virgo is misunderstanding you on purpose. Or even if you say it in the exact precise way, if you repeat back verbatim exactly what Virgo said to you, somehow they'll still find fault in what you said. And yeah, it can leave you feeling like you're being gaslit. But one of the things that I think it's important to understand about every sign is that there's an appropriate context for the thing that each sign is doing. I absolutely want this type of precision and analysis in my pharmacist. I absolutely want this kind of precision and analysis in the engineer that is, working on the roads or building homes and buildings. I absolutely want that precision there. But when it comes to my needs, when it comes to my emotions, when it comes to being able to receive feedback that, might contradict the literalism of Virgo, like I don't necessarily want the Virgo there. If you want to see what Virgo looks like, look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump has Jupiter in sidereal Virgo. And one of the behaviors or aspects of Donald Trump that you can connect to this Jupiter in Virgo placement is that he is oblivious to contradictions. He literally doesn't care. Because Jupiter's job, which is really at the center of this particular full moon, it's in sidereal Gemini, is to catch the pattern. And with Jupiter, we're like, okay, how many instances of a particular thing do you need to see or experience before you recognize the pattern? And Virgo is like, well, I am on 12,365 up. That's 12,366. And I think I'm going to collect a little bit more data. Right, there's this insatiable, similar to Jupiter in Gemini, where Jupiter is right now, there's this sense of there's an insatiable uh, need for data. in order to be certain that the calculation is right. This is the slippery slope because really quickly, for those of you who care about the astrology of this, Mercury is still in Aquarius at this full moon. So all of that stuff that I just talked about with Aquarius is still at play here. But this is the slippery slope of this whole needing to test the chromosomes of all of the women who are going to participate in the Olympics. Because at some point, that's not going to be enough. And so then they're going to have to make you pull down your pants and look between your legs. Because what is the actual data that proves your gender? You saying it clearly isn't enough. They don't believe you. Whether you're trans or assigned female at birth. You writing a legal affidavit under, the possibility of perjury or some kind of legal consequence, that's not enough either. So now they have to test your chromosomes. You think that's going to be enough? No, that's not going to be enough either. Like I said, they're going to make you pull down your pants and they're going to have to look in between your legs next. You think that's going to be enough? I'd be really interesting on to know where we are on this particular story when we get to the end of July through the end of 2026, actually, because we have a Venus retrograde, which will partially be in Virgo. And let me see. What have I written here in the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide? Man. Venus enters Sidereal Virgo July 31st, 2026. This is in the July fill in the blanks of the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide. Meticulously vetting people / relationships for discrepancies. I almost feel like these fill in the blanks write themselves, but they don't. I write them. And I'm just good at it. Venus is going to station direct in Sidereal Virgo. Man, this is until what, November? Making the consensus / relationship explicit. When I originally wrote these fill in the blanks, I was actually thinking about the midterm elections, but also just some historical precedent associated with this particular Venus retrograde cycle. Which, this is good for you to think about. Stick a pin in this full moon, right? Because the next time after this full moon that we're experiencing transits through Sidereal Virgo will be the Venus retrograde. So I think it's fair to say that in some way, this full moon is illuminating and making clear themes that we're going to be dealing with when we get to, the last 2 quarters of 2026. Going back to the election, I think that's part of it too, right? Just right now, Georgia is suing to get the 2020 election stuff back from the federal government. And this is all about, can we trust the numbers? Is the count unfortunately, I don't think we're doing nearly enough to be able to trust the numbers at the election, but given what the sky is going to be like, it's just going to be messy. I want to say this too, though, that this particular Venus retrograde, which this full moon is giving us a kind of setup or a prelude for, this particular Venus retrograde is a kind of new cycle. So Venus retrogrades in the same sign every 8 years, but eventually it drifts. So we have reached the year of the drift. 8 years prior to now and 8 years before that and so on and so forth, the Venus retrograde was wholly contained in Libra. This year, the Venus retrograde shifts backwards partially into Virgo, and the majority of it will be in Libra. The last time that this happened was when the treaty, I think it was the Paris Treaty, the treaty that ended the American Revolutionary War, was signed at the Venus retrograde that is identical in terms of degree and sign as the one that we are about to enter um, later this year. So you can even think of this year where we are right now as like parallel to, I think it was 1770. I don't know what the year was. Somebody else have to do it. Um, whatever the year was, 76, 77, 78, 79. I don't know. Um, you can think of right now, there are astrological parallels to what was happening that year. And I think some of the interesting things that we can observe is that the premise, allegedly, of the Revolutionary War was that they wanted to self-govern and they didn't want a king. But now, of course, news just out today, or the couple of days before today, it's March 27th, the day I'm recording this, and Donald Trump wants to put his signature on the currency, which technically is illegal, but what does that even mean? No other president who's been alive has had their signature on currency because that's what kings do. So there's this really, really, really interesting parallel. And honestly, I know my words hold weight with people, but just I'm not that professor in quotations Jane guy. So I'm not here to lay down the law of truth of what will be. You know, I do have a very good track record for being right, but I'm not going to do all of that today. So just take what I'm about to say with that in mind. There are a little bit too many parallels for me to ignore the possibility that the monarchy has already begun. And so if you are waiting for the 2028 elections, if you're waiting for the 2026 midterm elections, you missed that Donald Trump cheated in 2020 and he cheated in 2024. And you missed that they let him get away with it. And if you're confused because there seems to be contradictions that don't make sense to you and you just want to clearly see the facts, facts don't matter. Sorry. Facts do not matter. They don't. What matters more than anything is belief. And this is why I think people can get caught up in like The Secret and like the law of attraction and things like that. Like, really, people really believe that stuff is real because there is enough evidence out in the world to say, wow, belief is really that powerful. But I feel like that only really works for a limited few. First, if you're a white man, take The Secret and the law of attraction, live your best life. Absolutely attract your wealth and abundance, right? I mean, because the whole of society is structured to favor you. So, of course, you can close your eyes and meditate and manifest. You get in proximity to the right white man, you can manifest too. Manifestations for you and you and you. Manifestations for everybody who gets in right proximity to a white man. I know y'all think I am crazy, but that's all right. I'm all right with that. Clearly seeing the facts. Let's wrap this up. In your own life, really go back to what I said at the beginning. Thinking about your life at the end of 2025, what did you expect for things to look like right now? What did you expect to have changed by this point? What has been in a holding pattern in your life where you're trying to make sense of things, but you just feel like you're missing some information? You just feel like, ugh, the information I have is not enough. That very well may be true. There's also the factor of timing, right? Right? That like there's really a time and season for all things. And the way the planets have been moving, it really ain't been time for some things. So I want to leave space for that. But also, there are some things where the pattern is very, very, very clear. And like you're waiting for more information to clarify it for you. But that's like a send off. So why can't you just trust the pattern that's already been revealed to you? This full moon is highlighting the tension between our suspicion that things are not what they appear to be and our need for things to be made plain and literal. That you'll maybe somehow be able to trust that your suspicions are leading you to an accurate conclusion if you could just get the evidence to prove to you that whatever you have the inkling of. I'm all down for that. I love evidence. Absolutely. But one of the themes that has been emerging in my client work is this idea that your intuition is a subjective inner knowing that is for you first. And if you get caught up in trying to get other people to see, if you get caught up in trying to prove that the pattern or the inkling or the gut feeling that you're having is true, if you need other people to see it too, you'll miss the moment. You'll miss the point. There's something inherently alienating and isolating about suspicion, which is why we're witnessing in this really fascinating way this proliferation of suspicion as like this emotional state that spreads. It's infectious because no one wants to be in suspicion alone. No one really wants to be in any emotion alone. But I think that suspicion is a tough one. And so we need to point out the discrepancies and we need to point out where things are not what they appear to be to us because we want other people to join us in our suspicion. I think that that so-called Professor Jiang, who made the prediction about the war and violence against Iran on the hands of the United States and Israel. I think he's one of those people who is weaponizing your suspicion against you. I think he's one of those people who's taking advantage of the inherent contradictions of capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy. I think he is someone who is taking advantage of the inherent contradictions that exist when you try to have democracy and capitalism coexist. Who's taking advantage of your suspicion? Let's pull some cards. Hey, this is Dana popping in to remind you to use code TRY AGAIN for 20% off a select number of divination offerings through March 31st. Link to book is in the description. All right, I'm back with some tarot cards. Let's see what wisdom is available to us at this full moon at Sidereal Virgo, where we're clearly seeing the facts. We've got the Page of Swords. What an appropriate card. The Page of Swords is curious. The Page of Swords approaches information without judgment. The Page of Swords is open to learning. It questions. There's a genuine curiosity with the Page of Swords. Sometimes people perceive the curiosity of the Page of Swords as questioning authority. Has it ever happened to you before? Especially if you've got Sidereal, Virgo, or Gemini placements, where your curiosity and need to know more and understand is perceived as a performance of some kind. It's perceived as challenging authority, right? You just want to be sure. And that's a lot of what's in the Page of Swords. The Page of Swords just wants to be sure. It's just open, right? It says, give me more information. I'm going to observe. I'm going to collect this data. Now, is that a good thing? Sometimes. Is that a bad thing? Sometimes. Let's see what these cards have to say. We've got the Eight of Cups, and we've got the Ace of Swords. Well, I don't know of a more clear sequence of cards. The Eight of Cups is alerting us to the possibility that there is an emotional posture associated with our curiosity collectively at this moment. Curiosity seems like it's an intellectual thing. You can never have too much knowledge. You can never know enough. There's always more to learn. There's always more questions to ask. That's a very slippery slope to, well, you can never be sure. You never know for certain. Another conversation that I have often with clients is how for some people, certainty was a sin. For some people growing up, certainty was punishable by humiliation, by embarrassment, by condescension, right? Certainty was not a virtue. Believing yourself got you in trouble because somebody else always knows better than you. If you can't prove it, then it's going to be a problem. Are you someone who grew up in a house where you learned to rehearse what it is that you had to say because you knew as soon as you opened your mouth that you were going to be like in court? You wanted to ask a parent for something, you wanted to share a hardship or difficulty you were having, and you just were not believed. You had to prove it. And so you go into conversations thinking about every possible rebuttal that the other person is going to have. You go into conversations thinking about what it is, the holes that might get poked in your statement. For a lot of people, that's an indication that attempts to genuinely understand you were never made, and that it became your sole responsibility to make sure that you were understood. You had to say it right. You had to say it in the right way. You had to say it at the right time. You had to say it in the correct tone. And if any one of those factors were off, you were liable to be rejected, misunderstood, misinterpreted, told that you were wrong, or even said that you were lying. This is what I mean when I say there is an emotional posture that can be behind curiosity. And that emotional posture is lack of self-trust. And sometimes it's also not accepting the possibility that somebody doesn't want to understand you. I think one of the things that bites us in the butt, I mean, I think this is like a huge and major issue that we're collectively dealing with. One, the idea that people don't want to be contradictory, that people want to be having their words and intentions and actions always in alignment. We are operating from the assumption that being a hypocrite is like the worst thing you can be. we erroneously believe that if we just point out the contradictions enough, that like if we reach this certain threshold of contradictions we've pointed out, that somehow the other party will concede. They'll be like, you're right. I did say one thing and do a completely different thing. I do hold two contradictory beliefs. Let me go sort that out. You can have power for now. You can be in control now. You can have exactly what you want now. The Eight of Cups talks about leaving behind a particular emotional posture. It talks about divesting emotionally. Sometimes the Eight of Cups means you're leaving. It can mean that you have invested in a particular outcome. You've been on a particular emotional path. And the Eight of Cups says, yes, time to leave that behind. No sunk cost fallacy here. You can let it go. You can move on. And what we're moving on from is this childlike curiosity that at times absolutely is a virtue and absolutely is appropriate. But in this time and season, that type of curiosity, I think, is harmful to us. There'll be another time where the curiosity is the thing to do. But there's a certain way that this curiosity leaves you open to being lied to. Part of curiosity is abandoning what you already know or what you already believe to be true. Sometimes curiosity is abandoning yourself emotionally. Sometimes curiosity is abandoning yourself emotionally. Because you just need to find out. You just need to see what it's like. You just need to know for sure. So you just got to go see. Even though the pattern has already revealed to you what exactly is going on. Even though you've already had enough instances of this experience in your life to know how this is going to turn out. Why is it so hard for you to accept the pattern as truth? It's probably some childhood stuff in there, but there's also the grief. Because sometimes the pattern is in contradiction with what you want to be true. You want for this person in your life to be this thing. You want yourself to be this thing. You want your country to be this thing. You want what you learned from your pastor to be the truth. You want what you were taught in school to be the truth. You want the information that has been peddled to you through the news media to be true. Because what are the implications for accepting the pattern? Clearly seeing the facts says, yes, sometimes you need more data, but I don't think this is needing more data. Because again, sometimes data is self-abandonment. I've talked about this before on a previous episode where I shared how capitalism is insatiable. There is no amount of data that you can present to capitalism to make it stop exploiting you. There is no amount of data that you can collect and put in spreadsheets and present to men in power to present to the patriarchy as the institution and entity of men who feel entitled to power. and to domination, there's no amount of data that you can present to them that are going to make them concede power, that is going to make them stop being violent, that is going to make them stop raping and being pedophiles and stealing and burning up the world and destroying the climate and bombing. There is no amount of data. You can say that the bombs that Israel has dropped on Gaza and the bombs that's going off in the, East Asia right now are destroying the climate. They don't care. Now, there's a usefulness of this data to actually solve the problems and use our imagination to build the tools and imagine the future that we want to have. And that's necessary work. But the data is not to prove to capitalists, to white supremacists and patriarchs that they're doing a bad thing and they should stop. Because they're not going to. We have centuries of data that tell us exactly what is going on. You have years of data in your life that have already told you who and what you're dealing with. Whether that's your own internal patterns or the external dynamics that you're dealing with in your life, in your career, in your health, you already know what's going on with you. But you're being gaslit. Being gaslit is essentially the experience of being made to feel like you can't trust yourself. It's being made to feel like you can't trust a particular faculty. You can't trust your eyes. You can't trust your emotions. You can't trust your ears. You can't trust your sense of smell or sight. You can't trust your gut. You can't trust your capacity to do math. Right? And so you think the answer is like, okay, no, let me just recalculate. Let me just do it again. And maybe they'll believe me. Do you believe you? Let's call it a wrap here. Thank you for tuning in to the Divination for Liberation podcast. I am your host, Dana Lynn Knuckles, also known as the People's Oracle. I will see you in 2 weeks at the new moon in Aries. How about that for some new energy? April is definitely a transition month for us. And this new moon in Aries is really going to make that very apparent to us. Bring in the fire. Honestly, bring the fire, because somebody do something. That's what I associate with fire. Somebody do something. Because all this sitting and pontificating and arguing on the internet, and Lord have mercy, somebody do something. My COVID update this week is very minimal. We are at almost an all-time low of circulating COVID in the United States of America. And I really have been reflecting on arriving here. I know there are many of you who follow me and have stayed tuned and have become people who trust me because of my predictions about COVID being very accurate. And of course, you know that 2026 was the first year that I felt like we'd see some type of light at the end of the tunnel. And we're here, and it's looking good for now. But I was reflecting on just my own experience of my intuition strengthening over these past few years, and so necessarily for my survival. I literally could not believe the numbers that the government was putting out. I literally could not believe the information that the government was sharing about COVID, because Delta, the airline, decided to change the amount of days that you needed to quarantine after a positive COVID test, because they had too many of their employees getting sick. And it's so interesting that here we are again with Delta impacting government policy. There's no reason any corporation or person should have that much power. So Delta decides that the, Congress people don't get special treatment at airports And now all of a sudden TSA, there's money for TSA. Connect the dots, my friends. You got to clearly see the facts, man. You got to clearly see the facts. Anyways, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for all of you who have trusted me. I'm grateful for all of you who are new listeners here. There's quite a few of you, and I am just so incredibly grateful that you thought my words and my face were worthy of your attention for any amount of time that you shared this podcast and the content that I share on social media with your friends. I don't take that for granted. I know everyone is bombarded with an incredible amount of information, but if my voice and the words that I share rise above the fray in any way for you to hear and be moved by, for that I am truly, truly, truly grateful. You all take care of yourselves. Trust yourselves, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.